Boom! The ground beneath Max's feet trembled as a giant bubble of grey mud erupted into the sky. It wasn't an ordinary volcano with red-hot lava. It was something even more mysterious. A mud volcano. And the most amazing part. This bubbling, gurgling mud mountain was actually creating a brand new island right before his eyes. 10-year-old Max Reynolds wasn't expecting anything extraordinary to happen on a regular Tuesday morning. He was eating breakfast when his tablet pinged with a notification. It was from his Aunt Jessie, a famous geologist who traveled the world studying Earth's most incredible natural wonders. "Max, you won't believe what I just discovered. Pack your adventure backpack and meet me at the harbor in 1 hour. We're going on an expedition." Max nearly choked on his cereal. An expedition with Aunt Jessie, his heart raced with excitement. "Mom, Dad," Max called out, waving his tablet. "Aunt Jessie needs me for an expedition. Can I go? Please, please, please." His parents exchanged those grown-up looks they always shared when they needed to make a quick decision. "Well," his mom began, "your science project about Earth's formations is due next week. This could be perfect research. And Jessie is the most safety-conscious geologist I know," his dad added with a smile. "Yes!" Max pumped his fist in the air and raced to his room. He grabbed his special adventure backpack, the one with all the pockets, and started packing. Magnifying glass? Check. Notebook and pencils? Check. Water bottle and snacks? Double check. His lucky compass that Aunt Jessie gave him on his last birthday? Triple check. Exactly 58 minutes later, Max stood at the harbor, bouncing on his toes with anticipation. And there she was, Aunt Jessie with her wild curly hair tucked under her famous expedition hat, waving from a small research boat. "Ahoy, Max the Explorer," she called, "ready to witness something only a handful of scientists have ever seen up close?" As the boat cut through the waves, Aunt Jessie showed Max a satellite image on her tablet. It looked like a tiny grey dot. "In the middle of the ocean. See this?" She pointed excitedly. "3 days ago this didn't exist. Now it's a new island about the size of a football field, and it's still growing." Max's eyes widened. "A brand new island? How is that possible?" "That," Aunt Jessie said with a twinkle in her eye, "is exactly what we're going to find out, but I have a theory. Mud volcanoes." "Mud volcanoes?" Max repeated. "I thought volcanoes had lava and fire and stuff." "Most do," Aunt Jessie nodded. "But mud volcanoes are special. Instead of hot magma, they erupt with mud," Max interrupted, getting excited. "But how can mud make an island?" Aunt Jessie grinned. "That's the incredible part. Under the ocean floor, there are pockets of gas trapped beneath layers of clay and dirt. When enough pressure builds up, whoosh, the mud explodes upward, creating something like a giant underwater mud fountain. If it reaches the surface, it makes an island," Max finished, his imagination running wild with images of bubbling mud towers rising from the sea. "Exactly, and the satellite data shows this one is still active. If we're lucky, we might even see it growing in real time." The captain of the research vessel, Captain Marina, called out, "Land ho, or should I say mud ho?" In the distance, Max could see it, a flat grey patch in the middle of the blue ocean, with what looked like smoke rising from several spots. "Is that steam?" Max asked, pointing. "Good observation," Aunt Jessie said. "Those are gas vents. The same gas that pushed up all that mud is still escaping. That's how we know it's still active." As they approached the island, Captain Marina slowed the boat and dropped anchor a safe distance away. "We'll take the dinghy from here," she explained. "We need to be careful. This land is very new and might not be stable everywhere." Aunt Jessie handed Max a special suit that looked like something astronauts might wear. "This is a safety suit," she explained. "The mud might be hot in some places, and there could be gases we shouldn't breathe directly. Always follow my lead, okay?" "Got it," Max said, his voice slightly muffled as he pulled on the helmet. When their small boat touched the edge of the island, Max felt like the first explorer landing on an alien planet. The surface was a strange grey color, with a texture unlike any beach he'd ever seen, not sandy or rocky, but smooth in some places and cracked in others, like dry clay. "Remember," Aunt Jessie cautioned, "step only where I step. Some areas might not be solid enough to hold our weight." Max followed carefully, testing each step. The ground felt springy beneath his boots, almost like walking on a waterbed. And it was warm, not hot like he expected a volcano to be, but definitely warmer than regular ground. "Look at this, Max." Aunt Jessie pointed to a spot where the mud had dried and cracked in a beautiful pattern that looked like a giant puzzle. When the mud dries, it forms these amazing shapes. Scientists call these mud cracks. "They're beautiful," Max said, taking pictures with the camera Aunt Jessie had given him. But what fascinated Max most were the bubbling pools scattered across the island. Some were small, just the size of puddles, while others were as big as his bedroom back home. They gurgled and popped, occasionally sending up small splashes of grey mud. "Why is the mud grey?" Max asked. "I thought mud was brown." "Great question. This mud comes from deep below the seafloor, where there's a special kind of clay called bentonite. It contains minerals that give it this color." As they walked, Max noticed something really strange: tiny shells and pieces of coral embedded in the mud. "Aunt Jessie, look, seashells, but we're above the ocean now." Aunt Jessie knelt down to examine Max's discovery. "Excellent find, Junior. Geologist. This proves my theory. When the mud volcano erupted, it pushed up not just mud, but everything that was on the seafloor too, including these shells. Some mud volcanoes can bring up fossils that are millions of years old." Suddenly, a deep rumbling sound came from beneath their feet. The ground began to vibrate, and several of the bubbling pools started churning more violently. "Aunt Jessie?" "What's happening?" Max asked, trying to keep his voice steady even though his heart was racing. Aunt Jessie's eyes lit up with scientific excitement, but she quickly grabbed Max's hand. "The pressure is building again. We need to move to higher ground now." They hurried toward the center of the island, which rose in a gentle dome about 15 feet above sea level. Just as they reached the top, a tremendous glorp sound came from behind them. Max turned just in time to see an amazing sight. One of the larger mud pools had started to bulge upward, forming a huge bubble. Then, with a wet splat, it burst, sending a fountain of mud 20 feet into the air. "Whoa!" Max shouted, instinctively ducking even though they were a safe distance away. The mud splattered back down, expanding the island's edge by several feet in that direction. Max could hardly believe his eyes. He had just witnessed the island actually growing. "That was amazing," he exclaimed, jumping up and down despite the springy ground. "That," Aunt Jessie said with a proud smile, "was a mud volcano eruption. Much safer to watch than a regular volcano, but still incredibly powerful. The Earth is constantly changing, Max. Most changes happen too slowly for us to notice, but sometimes, like right now, we get lucky enough to see them happen in real time." For the next hour, they observed 3 more eruptions from their safe vantage point, each one adding more material to the island. Aunt Jessie explained how, over time, the mud would dry and harden, plants would eventually take root, and what started as a bubbling mud patch could someday become a permanent island, with its own ecosystem. As they continued exploring the safer parts of the island, Max noticed something peculiar, protruding from a dried section of mud. "Aunt Jessie, is that a bone?" Aunt Jessie carefully excavated the object with special tools from her pack. "Not quite, Max. This is something even more exciting for a geologist. It's a piece of methane hydrate, sometimes called fire ice." "Fire ice?" Max's eyes widened. "That sounds like something from a fantasy book." "It does, doesn't it? But it's real. Science. Methane hydrate is ice that has natural gas trapped inside it. It forms deep under the ocean, where there's enough pressure to compress the gas. When mud volcanoes erupt, they sometimes bring these chunks up. To demonstrate, Aunt Jessie carefully placed the small piece in a special container and lit a match. Near it, to Max's amazement, the ice-like substance actually began to burn with a steady blue flame. "It's ice that burns," Max exclaimed. "That's the coolest thing I've ever seen." "This is why mud volcanoes are so important to study," Aunt Jessie explained, as she extinguished the flame and sealed the sample. "They bring up materials from deep beneath the Earth's surface that we would never get to see otherwise." As the afternoon wore on, Aunt Jessie collected samples and took measurements, while Max helped by taking photographs and keeping notes in his adventure journal. He was especially careful to draw detailed pictures of the bubbling pools the cracks in the dried mud, and the way the new island looked from different angles. "You know," Aunt Jessie said as they prepared to leave, "new islands like this one need names for scientific records and maps." "Really?" Max perked up. "Who gets to name them?" "Usually the scientists who discover and study them first," she replied with a meaningful look. Max's jaw dropped. "You mean I could help name it?" "Well, you're part of the first scientific expedition to document it. I'd say that qualifies you for input on the naming committee." Max thought hard, wanting to come up with something perfect, something scientific, but also something that captured the amazing experience of watching an island being born from bubbling mud. "How about Bubblecrest Island?" he suggested. Aunt Jessie tested the name out loud. Bubblecrest Island. It's descriptive, memorable, and it sounds like an adventure waiting to happen. "I love it." She made a note in her official research log. Preliminary designation, Bubblecrest Island, named by junior geologist Maxwell Reynolds during initial expedition. Max beamed with pride. Not only had he witnessed an incredible natural phenomenon, but he'd contributed to real science, and now there would be an island on maps around the world with the name he'd given it. On the boat ride back, Max couldn't stop talking about everything. How they'd seen, and remember when that huge bubble went splat, and the fire ice and the shells from the bottom of the ocean. "Wait until I tell my class about this," Aunt Jessie laughed. "You know what? I think your classmates should hear about this directly from a scientific explorer." "You mean you'll come to my class?" "Actually," she said, "I was thinking of someone else, someone who just helped name a new island." Max's eyes widened. "Me? Give a presentation? Why not? You've taken excellent notes and photos. You've seen something most people never will. Knowledge is only valuable when it's shared, Max." The idea of standing in front of his class made Max's stomach flutter with nervousness. But it was also exciting. He imagined showing his classmates the pictures, explaining about the mud cracks and bubbling pools, maybe even bringing in some regular mud to demonstrate how mud volcanoes work. "I'll do it," he decided. "I can make a model of Bubblecrest Island with baking soda and vinegar to show how the mud erupts." "That's the scientific spirit," Aunt Jessie nodded approvingly. "Observation, documentation, and communication, the three pillars of good science." The following Monday, Max stood in front of his class, his model mud volcano ready on the table beside him, his tablet connected to the classroom screen to show his photos. "Last week," he began, his voice only a little shaky, "I helped discover and name a new island that didn't exist before. It was created by something called a mud volcano, and I was there to see it actually growing." By the time he finished his presentation, complete with a successful model demonstration that made satisfying bubbling noises, though much less messy than the real thing, even Mr. Garcia, the science teacher, was asking questions. "So these mud volcanoes," Jennifer from the back row asked, "do they only happen in the ocean?" "Great question," Max said, sounding just like Aunt Jessie. "They can actually form on land too. There are famous mud volcanoes in Azerbaijan, Italy, and even in Yellowstone National Park here in America. And they're helping scientists learn about deep earth materials without having to dig miles down," he added. "Aunt Jessie says it's like getting free samples from the Earth's depths." When the bell rang, Mr. Garcia asked Max to stay behind for a moment. "Max, that was one of the most engaging science presentations I've seen in years of teaching. You've turned scientific observation into a real adventure story. Would you consider doing a similar presentation for the school science fair next month?" Max couldn't believe his ears. From reluctant science student to featured presenter at the science fair, all because of mud. "Definitely," he agreed. "And maybe I can set up a video call with Aunt Jessie from her next expedition. She's going to Azerbaijan to study the largest mud volcanoes in the world." That night, as Max added the final touches to his science project, now filled with detailed information about mud volcanoes and the birth of Bubblecrest Island, he received another message from Aunt Jessie. It was a satellite image showing Bubblecrest Island, now almost twice the size it had been when they visited. And there, visible from space, someone had used rocks to spell out Max on the highest point of the island. Official scientific marker, Aunt Jessie's message read, so everyone will know who helped discover this amazing place. Proud of you. Junior geologist, where should we explore next? Max smiled, already imagining his next great adventure. The world was full of incredible natural wonders just waiting to be discovered. And now he knew that with careful observation, scientific thinking, and a sense of adventure, he could be part of uncovering Earth's amazing secrets. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Max dreamed of bubbling mud, islands being born from the sea, and all the wonderful mysteries our planet still has to share with those curious enough to explore them.